Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Saturday of the 16th week in Ordinary Time. In the kitchen again, favorite place to be. You know, in the Italian family, a lot of discussions happen in the kitchen. I'm telling you that. My mom and I sat in the kitchen to talk about my entrance into the seminary. We had to sit and talk because my mother was not too keen on me going, because she thought she would never see me again and all that. And she was like, no. And I was like, Mom, let's go in the kitchen. All the good stuff, all the good decisions are done in the kitchen, right? From table to the Lord's table. Isn't that beautiful? It's just that whole, the whole sacredness of the table, the food. There's a sacredness about that. Many people wrote about that. Many people wrote about the sacredness of the Eucharistic altar or table and the kitchen or dining room table, and a comparison. Now, of course, there are many comparisons, that we could talk about. But I just want to tell you that I'm back in the kitchen again, and I want to talk to you about it. And I left these books out because I thought, let's talk about the Gospels. Let's talk about the Gospels, okay? So let's hear about the Gospel of today. It's a continuation from yesterday. So yesterday, it was Matthew 13, 18 to 23. Today, we're going to listen to Matthew 13, 24 to 30. So who says that Catholics don't read their Bible? Who says that? Come on. Stop falling for the same trap that you hear. Of course Catholics read the Bible. Of course Catholics hear the Bible. If you go to Mass every day for 3 years, bingo. I'm telling you. So let's continue the great sacred scripture, the great message of salvation. So Jesus proposed a parable to the crowd. He says, the kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds all through the wheat and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the household came to him and said, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from? He answered, an enemy has done this. His slaves said to him, do you want us to go and pull them up? He replied, no. If you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until harvest. Then at harvest time, I will say to the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them up in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn. Interesting. The weeds with the wheat. Well, no one likes weeds. They get in the way. It's not pretty. It doesn't look nice. It cuts off life. It kills things. Nobody likes weeds. Well, guess what? Weeds are like sin. Weeds are like sin. And so sin is all around here. So where did this sin come from? The evil one. He comes at a time where we don't expect him, and he knows our Achilles heel. And he just will then plant these sins. He makes things attractive to us, and we fall for the trap. Isn't that interesting? We fall for the trap, and all of a sudden we're in a bind, so to speak, and we fall into sin. And sin is all around us. Sin is all around us. It's even in the midst of good. It's even in the midst of good. Even the church, right? The weeds are in the midst of the wheat. In society, the weeds are in the midst of the wheat. In the police force, the weeds are in the midst of the wheat. In the armed forces, the weeds are in the midst of the wheat. You have good and bad. You don't destroy everything. You don't put the police force and throw them under the bus because of the wheat, because of the weeds rather. You don't do that with the church because of the weeds. Isn't it interesting that this parable, let the weeds stay until harvesting time, and then we'll bundle up the weeds and we'll burn them, and the wheat will go into my barn. See, the harvest time will be at the end of the world, right? So many people say, where is God in all this? See, God is very patient with our sinfulness. God is very patient with our sinfulness. We would rather say, no, get rid of them all right now, God. Get rid of everything. Get rid of it all. What do you mean, get rid of it all? Because we're also sinful. All of us are. So what weeds? That's a hard, I'm getting confused between weeds and wheat. That's a hard thing to say. Weeds, wheat, weeds, wheat. I know what I'm saying, but sometimes the word, see, even like when you're talking, how they're intermingled, right, that's a lesson right there. Weeds and wheat. You know, I get confused. We get confused. What are weeds? What are wheat? Because somebody might say, that's not a weed, that's a flower. Right? And you'll say, no, that's a weed. Pull that up. No, don't touch that. That's fine. Let it grow. You'll see. Sometimes we see that it is a weed. Sometimes we find out that it's not a weed. God is very patient in all of this. You and I have to understand the parable of the weeds and the wheat. The parable of the weeds and the wheat, that God gives us enough time in our own life to convert, to change. Because at the end, the weeds are going to be bundled up and thrown into the fire. You heard the parable, right? And the wheat will go into the barns, into the safe haven, into heaven. Fire, barn. Burned up, safe place. You could almost understand the weeds and the wheat and understand this parable and how they're intermingled sometimes. And that's going to happen all throughout life. I'm sorry to say that, but that doesn't mean that you throw the entire garden and rip it out. In other words, here, let me just get rid of the entire church because of these weeds. No, but there are people that believe that. There are people that believe because of these weeds, I'm not going to be bothered with this garden anymore, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it, and I think the whole garden should be thrown away. Now, when I say that, I mean the church. People believe that. I don't believe that. So here's the police force. There might be weeds. So we don't respect the police force. We throw everything out. Throw everything out. Is that the right way to do it? Politicians, there's weeds. Do we not believe that people are really helping us, serving our country and our world to be a better place? Do we get rid of everything and disrespect our country? There's people that believe that. See, it's this whole parable of weeds and wheat. We have to come to an understanding of it. Good and evil. And good and evil are going to be in the same garden of life. They are in the same garden of life. We have to make sure that we are not strangled by the weeds. That we maintain the beauty of a garden and not get strangled by the weeds of life. That's our job. That's our job. To allow God to protect us and to pray that the evil one does not inflict his poison on us. At the end, God will take care of everything. But he permits this. He permits that there's a time of conversion. There's a time for change. Now, you may not agree with that unless you're the one that's being converted. I mean, if you're the one who's being converted, you're like, thank God. Thank God God gave me some time. How about the people who are in addictions? Think of all the addictions out there. Do you want to list all of them? Think of all the addictions. No, God says, don't. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. At the end, there'll be a time where everything will be separated. Leave them alone. Let's see what happens throughout time. I think, my brothers and sisters, we have to understand the parable of the weeds and the wheat, and understand it personally and collectively, and understand what Jesus is saying about the weeds and the wheat that are together. And what are we called to do? And what will happen at the end? And isn't it interesting that it's all permitted? Not that we condone evil, but that it's permitted for a time in which someone will change. And thanks be to God that we were not burned up and thrown away. Thank God we have a merciful God who is patient with us, who allows us the time that we need. Well, have a good day, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.